All right, hey guys. Started to film you a live cast and lost signal, so we'll just kind of do this on record, and I'll upload it. But wanted to talk to you guys about something today. Wanted to kind of engage your mind a little bit and get you to think a little bit. Um, I've got here. This is Field Manual 3-25.150. It is the U.S. Army Manual for combatives. So just got a page taken out of it here. Section 1.1, Definition of Combatives. Hand-to-hand combat is an engagement between two or more persons in an empty-handed struggle or with handheld weapons such as knives, sticks, or projectile weapons that cannot be fired. Okay? So basically, they're defining combatives as an engagement between two or more individuals, either empty-handed or with weapons, but those weapons are not fired. I would disagree with this, and I've got a friend of mine. If you want to check out his channel, he and I don't agree on everything. We're kind of coming from different perspectives on things, but he does have a good channel and he does know what he's talking about. C4 Combatives, C the letter, 4 the number, and then Combatives. I think it's all together. You can check out his channel and stuff. He's got some different views on things, but by all means, you want to take in different views and then make your own decision. But I want you to see how they define combatives. So, two or more individuals with no weapons or with handheld weapons, but those weapons are not firearms. Now, this is the U.S. Army definition for it. I would disagree with this because I would think that it would need to involve weapons, especially when you go through the Combatives Manual and even in McMap and the Marine Corps Manual, they start going into strikes, bayonet strikes, things like this. They start going into basically how to deal with close combat encounters as it relates to long guns. So why you would not include firearms in that, I really don't know. I mean, that gets more into the politics of Big Army and how they've broken it up, but it is what it is. So there's the definition for combatives. Um, but the reason that I bring this up is because the next paragraph, section 1-2, purposes of combatives training, and it goes through just a short section here, to basically that there are varying levels of intensity and that soldiers need to be brought up, not just with the intent of using deadly force, but varying levels of degree below that. But one of the other things I wanted you to see is that the two of the bulleted points down below is the culmination of a successful physical fitness program enhancing individual and unit strength, flexibility, balance, and cardiorespiratory fitness. The next bullet is building personal courage, self-defense, self-discipline, and esprit de corps. Now, the reason that I bring that up is because the definition of a martial art is a codified system and tradition of combat practices which are practiced by or practiced for a number of reasons: self-defense, law enforcement, military, and that provide a mental and or spiritual development. So one of the things that I see more and more is I see this divide between combatives and martial arts, and um, there is no divide. There's no difference. By definition, by U.S. Army Manual definition, the U.S. Army Manual includes a mental and or spiritual aspect to their training, namely that of personal courage, self-defense, or self-confidence, self-discipline, and esprit de corps. Those are all things that have to do with your mental development and growth, uh, and basically your belief system, the esprit de corps that the unit benefits from the individual training. Um, and the reason that I kind of bring this up is because of the divide that is coming across, and I know why the divide is there. Because of this divide, we end up finding ourselves at odds in the combatives realm with martial arts. Um, and like I said, there is no divide because combatives is by definition a martial art. One of the things that I want you to see is on the Fort Belvoir website, they've got a document up there, a PDF called The History of Modern Army Combatives. It says, in 1995, the commander of the 2nd Ranger Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Stan McChrystal, ordered a reinvigoration of martial arts training. And this is where MACP comes in. So, even by implication here, Lieutenant Colonel McChrystal viewed the combatives that was being used at the time. I don't know what the Army was using at the time. I know the Marine Corps used to use line training and then went to McMat. But prior to MACP, I don't know what the Army was doing. But basically, he viewed that whatever their current combatives program was, it was a martial arts. That's how he saw it. And it goes on to talk about here how, Staff Sergeant at the time, Matt Larson, went around. He had some experience in martial arts, and he brought that experience in martial arts, and he examined different units from all over the world, and basically they had basically landed on in the realm of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he talks about here, after meeting with the Gracies in Torrance, California, it says, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as taught at the Gracie Academy, fit almost every aspect of the military's needs perfectly. It was easy to learn and had a competitive form, so competition was a necessary component. Had a competitive form and was proven effective within the arena of hand-to-hand fighting. Okay? So they looked at BJJ. Once again, combatives is martial arts. Combatives is not at odds with BJJ. The next thing it talks about here is it says, it did, however, have some problems. One aspect of jiu-jitsu was that it was principally designed for one-on-one arena fighting, and another aspect was that there was a sportive aspect of jiu-jitsu that had a great potential to change the art into something not oriented towards fighting, which I agree with. And we see that even today with some of these jokers coming out with things like donkey guard and some of this just absolute retarded stuff that's fine in competition, but that's not real world practical martial arts. That's the IDPA equivalent of self-defense. It's guys basically training for competition, not guys training for self-defense. Which, in my opinion, if we go back to the definition of martial arts, it's no longer a martial art if your chief focus is just competition. So it goes on to talk about that, and then it basically says that the Rangers would start with the basics of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, ground fighting, and then progress into throws and takedowns of judo and wrestling, and then strikes from boxing and Muay Thai. So what you have here is essentially the Rangers had adopted what everybody else was already learning, and that was namely that those three core studies of martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling, were what was going to be the best avenue and the best three things that you're going to train. But I want you to see what the basis of U.S. Army combatives was. It was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay? Now I realize that was kind of a long way around to get to this subject, but this is what I want you to grasp. There's a lot of people that now, because Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, not at all schools, but in some schools, has become more competition oriented, people want to pull away from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they want to draw a divide between combatives and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There would be no U.S. Army combatives. There would be no MACP without Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay? According to the history of combatives on the U.S. Army website. MACP is a martial art. It is technically, by definition, a mixed martial arts because it incorporates not just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but other aspects. But here's where some of the problem lies. Unfortunately, when you're teaching a large unit of guys and you have to mass produce guys, you don't have the time or the ability to go into that core foundational training of laying that groundwork and explaining the methodology, because quite honestly, that is stuff that takes time. It takes years to begin to learn that. And what you have to do is you have to pump these guys out of training and get them up to level 1 certified, usually by the end of their basic training. I know in the Marine Corps it's that way. They get their tan belt, after basic now. But the point being is that you have to mass produce these guys. So what they do is they go in and they teach these moves. Okay, we're going to teach 5 moves, 6 moves, however many moves, it doesn't matter. We're going to teach the easiest moves that we feel provide the highest percentage of success, and we're going to teach it to these guys in a short amount of time. So basically you end up with Combatives level 1. And then it progresses from there, and basically, level 2, they might get into, another 5 more moves, or level 3, level 4, and so on and so forth. And it expands, and it increases in complexity slightly, but understand that at the end of the day, all it is a, and I'm not saying this to poo-poo it, all it is a watered down version of BJJ. It's a watered down version of Muay Thai. It's a watered down version of wrestling. What they did is they went in, they took aspects of BJJ that they felt were relevant to their particular area of operations and their particular mission, and they said, we're going to take these aspects and we're going to apply it. Some of the problem lies, though, in that in the civilian world, you do have the time, you do have the ability to apply those foundational bases. And it's, in my opinion, it's absolutely necessary. No different than if I were to take you out to the range and teach you, basic marksmanship, pistol marksmanship. I'm going to start off with grip. I'm going to develop into, trigger control and reset and things like this. Now, I could just run you through the training and be like, okay, point the thing downrange and pull the trigger. Point it at the target and pull the trigger. But I don't give you, and you could become lethal at that point. Maybe I give you a heightened level of training and say, okay, for the next phase, level 2, I'm going to show you how to align the sights. Point it downrange, pull the trigger. And then level 3 and level 4, and we can add layers of complexity and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, all I've done is watered down. If I haven't provided you the foundational basis for what it is that I'm teaching, then you're still only getting a light version. If you've ever downloaded one of those apps before, some of these long-range shooting apps you can download for your phone, they've got the one that you pay $25 for, and then they got the light version, which doesn't do the wind and the calculations and the bullet drop and all this stuff. So understand that when you get into combatives, you're getting a light version of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And this is just straight up honest. Because I see combatives guys of all levels, level 1 through 4, come into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools and get smoked. In all fairness, they're trained in a different program. They're trained to be mixed martial artists, so to speak. They're trained for a different environment, an environment that is not the same as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys. But they are also trained to a different level of understanding. They don't have the foundational basis. And one of the things that we have to do as teachers is when some of these guys come out of the military and they roll into our schools, is I have to calm them down many times, because they've been trained and pushed to the point where they feel that violence of action surpasses technique, surpasses doing the move correctly. And one of the analogies I use with my students is an example that my dad gave me years and years ago. And my dad, you know, growing up in construction, he could drive a nail in 3 hits. He would set it in 1 and drive it down in 2 and 2 more. So 3 hits he could sink a nail. But that required years of practice and technique and understanding and so on and so forth. And he even got into things, you know, tricks that they used to do, like taking the rounded edges. You know, they would actually grind the hammer heads flat so that the hammer wouldn't skip off the edge of the nail and bend the nail. You know, just different things like this that guys in that particular field would know because they are experts in that field. By the same token, when he was teaching me this, I could not come in and sink a nail in 3 hits. I would set it in 1, maybe 2, and then I would continue to hit this thing until I sunk it down. So maybe 6, 7, 8 hits. A lot of times when I see some of these guys from military combatives programs come into, and this is not just MACP, this is all military units, come into a more foundational, a more intense level of training, when I see them come in, a lot of the things that I see is I see basically guys sitting there with a hammer and beating the ever-living shit out of a board and not even hitting the nail. Or they will swing that hammer just as fast as they can and just 30 hits a second and never hit the nail. Guys, I don't care how fast you do a technique. If you do it wrong, it doesn't work. I don't care how much intensity and violence of action things you apply to the situation. If you do it wrong, it's not going to work. So the foundational training that is necessary, it starts to become necessary. You know, you bring in a guy in from like a military combatives role and you put him in a civilian environment where I do have the time and the ability to take time and kind of clean up some of the fact that this guy thinks he knows how to do an armbar, or he thinks he knows how to pass guard, but there's literally 100 different mistakes in there, and the first time he tries to pass guard, he gets freaking double armbarred, or he gets triangled, or he gets swept, or whatever. I mean, he has no idea. So what he does is we put him back in that position again, and he tells himself, well, I got to go harder, I got to go faster, I got to be meaner, I got to do it more aggressive, because that's what he's been taught. And what I have to do is I have to go into that guy and tell him, chill the fuck out, calm down, you're not even close to doing it right, you're beating the shit out of the board and you're not even hitting the nail, calm down. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a perspective on some of the differences by definitions, because I think it's really important that if we're going to argue over differentiations, you have to define the terms, all right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have to define, if you're going to say that combatives is not a martial art, you got to define a martial art. And according to the Army manual, it's a martial art. So wanted to kind of give you guys something to think about there. And I wanted, you know, I'm hoping that that becomes relevant to your training, particularly when you're going out there and you're just trying to throw massive amounts of force or massive amounts of speed or whatever. You're trying to throw this at the problem without really truly understanding how to do the thing. Even within the MACP manual, they've got a doctrine in there called crawl, walk, run. All right, this is a foundational principle to all martial arts, not just MACP, all martial arts, that you have to learn how to crawl. You got to learn how to do the move first. Then we'll speed it up a little bit. Maybe we'll give you a little bit of resistance and you'll do the walk. Then we'll put you in a real environment and we'll actually let you run. But if you're trying to run, all you're going to do is beat the hell out of that board. You will never hit that nail. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully that gives you guys some perspective. So as usual, you guys train hard.